All right, everybody, it's the Jerry Metcalf podcast where top real estate agents tell how they do it. And back on the show for round two, this is going to be episode 308, and you were last on episode 194. But everybody, we've got Moira Holley in Seattle with Realogics, Sotheby's International Realty. Moira, it's so good to see you.
It is so great to see you, Jerry. I have been looking forward to this, and I'm delighted that you invited me back. Thank you.
Well, me too. So everybody, if you haven't met Moira yet, this woman is a force to be reckoned with, and you wouldn't always know it. She's not the typical stereotypical agent. She's an agent who's representing a lot of the who's who of Seattle, Washington, some of the most exquisite, most unique, and most gorgeous properties in Seattle, Washington. And so we're going to revisit a little bit today about breaking into this business. But on this interview, we're going to talk a lot more about the market today and what it is in the world of being a top agent and living that in today's world and just in general.
Well, I'm truly delighted, Jerry, and that was a very, very complimentary introduction. I can't thank you enough.
Well, here's question number one, because you're probably like, Jerry, where do you want me to go with that? Let's revisit for a minute, kind of just give us the quick run of, hey, this is where I grew up and how and why I got into real estate. And then I'm going to start really giving you the questions about today.
Okay. Well, absolutely. I think we covered this last time, but I knew that real estate was going to be my destiny ultimately when I was in junior high school, maybe even earlier. Looking for real estate with my parents, riding around in the back seat of my parents' agents, BMW at the time, and it just felt right. I always, when thinking about my career path, I always thought, well, how am I actually going to spend my day? And I knew that it wasn't going to be behind a desk, in front of a computer, or looking at something in a lab. So when I was, when I was riding around in the back of my parents' agent's car, I just thought, I can do this. I can do this. I would love to do this. I would love to see all these wonderful, interesting, beautiful, unique properties, on a daily basis. And it took a long time for me to actually circle back to it. Many career, starts and different paths along the way that all sort of brought me back to it. And ultimately it was spending time with an architect who really shed a lot of light on why design matters. And wow. that was the beginning.
Wow. Now, who was the architect?
Oh, I won't say his name, but he is a fairly well-known architect here in Seattle, and we became friends in the mid-'80s, and it started a whole series of events for me. But I didn't understand design at that time.
It will something that I'd love to hear, and this will pivot us into what it really means to work in the upper tier of luxury homes today, and especially in a market like what you're in, is a few things. In the 80s, everybody didn't want to be a real estate agent when they grew up. They didn't have the TV shows that kind of put paint a different picture from what it really is. But also, it wasn't a time when everybody wanted to do it. And you came into this business, I think a lot of people, I kind of know they do. We all know a lot of times, especially in the old days, people kind of fell into real estate because they had to.
Right.
Or it was even considered like the housewife's job. Now you came into it from a totally different angle. From this is my profession, meeting a famous architect, learning design, learning not just real estate, but luxury. Did you see that coming, or did that evolve? And then let's talk about what that means to you today.
Well, I think real estate was something that the path that I had taken between high school, college, and my first jobs were all sales jobs, and they were the typical, retail sales, or then I moved into outside sales. And outside sales was something that gave me so much freedom, not a lot of money, but I was able to travel, and I was representing specialty food companies here on the West Coast, here in Seattle, Dilettante Chocolates for one, very famous chocolatier, Dana Davenport. And I was representing these specialty food items and taking them to New York. And then when I went to New York, I met interesting artists and jewelry designers and brought their pieces back to Seattle. And so I had this little business of going back and forth and spending, a week or two in New York and a week or two here in Seattle. And it really opened my eyes. And I thought, wow, well, I'm having fun, but I'm really not making much money. I need to do something else. And that was how combined with the knowledge that I was gaining from this architect and the interest in architecture, design, how it all fits together, I thought, I could really bring something different to the table, because in the early 90s, most of the realtors that I met didn't really think about design, and they weren't really into architecture. They knew the difference between a Tudor and a ranch style home and a craftsman, but that was about it. So I felt that I could really create a niche with my passion for architecture and design. And that's ultimately what ended up happening. But it took many years for me to get to work at the level that I was hoping to work, to work in.
A lot of people do a lot of things for a lot of years and don't get far with it. And in yours, it was understanding what the skill set was and honing your craft. But taking us back to, as you were there, we're going to get to today, but I think this draws the picture for what you're doing today. How did that evolve? Like, was there a moment when you thought this just isn't going to work, or you knew it was going to work? And was there a breaking point where it went from, kind of like that tipping point, Malcolm Gladwell, where it kind of all came through? Or how did that unfold?
Well, it was interesting because I just moved back to a condominium in downtown Seattle, half a block from the Pike Place Market. And when I was studying to take the test to get my real estate license back in 1992, I was living in a small apartment in the Pike Place Market in a very well-known hotel who had 10 studio apartments. And so I knew that if I joined an office where the owners had listings in the Pike Place Market, right around in the core of downtown Seattle, that I could help them. And so I really decided to join an office where I knew there would be support in that regard, and where they actually needed help from a junior agent. So I started doing open houses for these agents who had beautiful listings. And then eventually I forged a path in the direction of lofts and historic properties. And we have a neighborhood here in Seattle called Pioneer Square. And that's where the majority of lofts and historic buildings are. So I became known as the loft lady. And that was unique. And it was before lofts were a thing. There were these buildings that had been converted, old warehouses and, historic buildings. But they were just getting to the point where they were converting from apartments or, rentals to condominiums. And so I saw an opening and an opportunity to become the go-to person. And that's what I did. And then that stepped into more condominiums, and, many people who were hoping to purchase condominiums also had homes in other neighborhoods. And so I volunteered to help them sell their homes, help them buy their condominiums. And so I started stepping out of just condominiums and working in neighborhoods. And then a lot of potential clients saw what I was doing with the lofts and with the various luxury condominiums downtown, and they started asking me to help them with their homes. So I've always, I guess, in the very beginning, I started with condominiums, but I really branched out fairly quickly into residential as well. So they both just started coming up, and,
Yeah.
and with every listing, there was a new opportunity, or with every
Well,
sale.
well, what it would going, it's funny how Steve Jobs always says when you look backwards, you can see how the dots line up. So the first thing was connections. Show me your 5 closest friends and I'll show you your future. So the architect, and then putting yourself with the connections in the place and around the people. And then also recognizing I have the connections, the place, and the people, but adding that support. And now once I've got this support, the next thing that happened was, okay, now you've got your people that are lining you up for your future. Is being the best in the world at something. Being the best in the world is way underrated. The best in the world at lofts where there wasn't even a market for it yet. And that opened the next door step by step. It's like everybody wants to be the best in the world at everything, but it's funny. It's kind of like playing the lottery. So then that led into more condos, and then that led into homeowners, and then that led into beautiful homes that led into where you are now, and the people and the support and the expertise that was building with that through time positions you. Now, when would you say was kind of that there was that evolution, and it's always an evolution, right? But there was that moment where you went, there was a loft lady and you're doing condos and you're kind of, for lack of a better word, maybe even hustling a little, except the common denominator of the assurance of success is the connections, the people, and the support.
Right.
At what point did you kind of like become who you are today?
Probably in around 2000 and 2005. And keep in mind, Seattle is the center of tech. So the market was booming, and we had a lot of .coms, and there was a lot of money and a lot flowing into the city, and Seattle was really growing and bursting. So 2000 and 2005, were crazy, really crazy years. But 2000, maybe as early as 97. But when I started selling real estate in 92, the market was very flat. And so I came into the market at an interesting time when it wasn't just off the hook. And
Yeah.
and you really had to work.
Well, interest rates were still pretty high, even in 92, weren't they?
They were.
Yeah.
They were. And I was working with first-time home buyers at that time. I mean, I was working with people that I knew who were also my age.
Did you ever think that you were going to be who you are today?
I don't know. Who am I? No. I
Do you ever
don't know.
think you got like the listings that you've got and that you've sold? I mean, they are exquisite. I mean,
There,
there's one that's like basically, I don't have it, like it's like on the water. I can't find it now. You just sold it. But I mean, exquisite properties.
and
You didn't start
that
there. Yeah.
that was a career high. And I've had some incredible success. And I think to put a point on the timeline of having the ability to sell a lot of beautiful lofts, and people getting to know my name for lofts, and then rolling that into luxury condominiums, along with selling soup to nuts, smaller condominiums, larger lofts, smaller lofts, penthouses. And I
Yeah.
think I still hold a record today, along with my co-listing agent, but it was my client, and so I still hold the record for the highest sale in downtown Seattle for a condominium. But when I sold it to my client at the time when he bought it, and he had just sold this company to Google, and so he wanted to buy a project. The first time we sold it, it was the high sale for downtown Seattle, and I think it was 6.7 at that time. Later on, many years later, after he totally redone it, enjoyed it for many years, we sold it for 12 million. So,
Wow.
and that still holds the record for downtown Seattle. We have not had a sale exceeding 12 million downtown.
Wow.
And
What is it? What does it
that,
mean? What do you think it takes to be that kind of agent, a record breaker?
oh, I, I, I think having the memory of the past, and being able to call on all of the sales that, everything that you've seen, really. I think the history that you keep in your head, you can just recall, and I always remember the records, and I've set many records over the years. I have the first the first listing to top $1,000 a foot, and our market has gone like this, over the years. But I remember, and I actually moved into the building where I had that listing, of the first
Wow.
unit to sell for more than 1,000 a foot. And and the market has gone up, the market has gone down, and I purchased my unit last year at a 10-year low pricing. So I did not pay $1,000 a foot.
Well, here's what's awesome about you. It's like, most agents, there's just this, like, you think you're going to kill somebody kind of, and I mean that not just as an observation, it's not a negative one, but there's just this really just relentless, there's this obvious relentlessness in them. It's in you too, but the cool thing about you is you're so poised, you're so grounded, you're like the Buddha or like Eckhart
Wow.
Tolle, right?
Wow.
They don't see you coming. You probably know Eckhart Tolle, what is he famous for? I love his book, The Awakening. He's famous for the power of now. But anyway, where was I going with that other than I love that? But where I was going with that actually was there's that relentlessness about you that the data and you're breaking sales records over and over again. And somebody might see that and see you and say, oh, she's lucky. Or they
Right.
might say, but it's funny how luck tends to work. Doesn't work out over and over again that way for someone. So what would you say to
Right.
this?
Oh, I was sharing with someone close to me yesterday that I was delighted to do this podcast with you today. And I said, oh, I'm not sure what we're going to talk about. And she said, well, you need to talk about the fact that you love what you sell, and you love selling things that you love. And my takeaway from that was, yes, I think that's what we do when we share our good fortune and we share a sale. You're paving the way for the next opportunity and hoping that people who have properties like the property that you just sold, I know it sounds obvious, right? But if you have a victory in what we do, and you're fortunate enough to sell a beautiful home, something that has exquisite architecture, it's on the right site, it's the right architect, it's the right designer, and it's the best view, so call it the right view. I mean, what's better than that? So to take past sales and promote those sales in print or wherever you like to to share your success. I think focusing on that as the next step is really what brings more business that is like that business that you just had success with. And I did have success in selling a beautiful, beautiful Tom Kundig, Olson Kundig house back in November. And it was off market. It was offered to only 10 agents. And for some reason I missed the text when it came through. And I was busy. I missed the text, I know. And fortunately, I was on the phone with my colleague's broker asking about off-market waterfront property that he had for another client. And he said, Molly is trying to get a hold of you. She has a beautiful Kundig property on Queen Anne, which is a beautiful neighborhood here in Seattle. And he said, she's trying to get a hold of you. I looked through my texts and there it was.
You're that good, right?
I called her.
Yeah.
I called her and sent a text to my clients, and they said, when can we see it? And we closed in 10 days. We went in, we did it. That was it. And it set a record. It also set a record on Queen Anne.
So. Of course, because your name's on it.
But not the highest sale, but for a long time. And agents were surprised because it was just so exquisite. And it would be $2,500 a foot to build it today.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So, a lot of people that don't know real estate might hear that whole thing that you said and say, yeah, so it just happened to you. Yeah. You took success step by step. And in every step, you focused on the right things. You had the foundation of, remember, we said people, connection, support. You also continued to learn the market, and you continued to focus on the right things, the right properties, the right opportunities, and literally take it in pace. And it's funny how, it's like whether it's a sport and anything you do, when you do that, that's when you excel in it. And that's exactly, rather than led by ego, it's led by excellence. It's led by serving others, and not in what is the word? And not in vanity, like truly serving others and really understanding. I think something that brings it home that we haven't talked much about yet is where we started, is that architecture. Like there's a difference between a big house and a big, nice house. There's a different, like houses aren't just size and bedrooms and baths. That's right. Houses aren't just square footage. There's a lot more to a property than beds, baths, and square footage.
Exactly.
When you look at that, what are kind of the core, when you look at like what makes a great design? Like I think about Frank Lloyd Wright. He took the quote unquote worst lots and made them the best by what he built on them, the limitations they had. He made those into something great. But when you think about what makes a great design, what's the difference? What are the nuts and bolts of it?
I think this is what separates agents out there too, is you either have it or you don't. The knowledge of materials, build quality, who the contractor was, who the architect was or is, who the designer is, and who worked on the project, who helped this homeowner either do a renovation or help them design and build their dream house. And I think that certainly is what separates me in this market, is that I really love architecture and design, and people know that. And so I'm highly sought after for architecturally significant historic homes in some cases, but generally architecturally significant and or standout design. So, and the whole package, for instance, the waterfront home in the Reed estate that you were mentioning, ultimately the owners are moving back in, and at the towards the end, and when they were making their decision to move back in, we had 3 interested parties, one of whom sent letters after, I received a hard no on more showings. They sent letters and, they went unanswered. And I drove by the other day because there's a gate at the end of the enclave there, and their house is at the end. There were 8 trucks in the driveway. So they're doing a major renovation before they move back in. But they made a decision and they ended up selling other properties instead. And they fell in love with their home all over again. And may have had something to do with all of the beautiful marketing. I think all their friends
They
were
remembered what they had,
their
right?
friends
Like, you're
were
such a great agent. You sold the house back to the seller.
and
Oops.
it could be. I think friends were all telling them, why in the world would you be selling that house? It's the best house in Seattle. So, it's time just wasn't there. And it's funny how in the end we had so much interest. So, and I still have some wonderful buyers, some wonderful clients that I met through that listing. So.
Well, what I love about that is I remember as I advanced in my career, I'd have sellers say, Jerry, you're going to make me not want to sell the house. I was like, well, that's the idea, right? Like if we're doing it right, I think that gets way underestimated is the value of that and understanding it. Earlier, I think there's this kind of dichotomy of who, right? Like who built the house? Well, who here, like not to, but like who built the house means everything because of what they build the house with. I can walk into a house and it doesn't matter. Well, there are 2 things. You can tell who built it when you walk in it because you know their work, and their work is what made them who they are, which is what made them great. When you look at designers, I think there's I remember being an agent and builders would come in and start building big houses and put the same price tags on them as other houses the same size, and the houses were worth half or less because the materials, the design, the layout, the smallest of details that do and don't make the biggest differences in a property. As you look at architecture, and this may be too vague of a question, but what are the things that just stand out to you? What are the nuances? What are the subtleties of good design versus bad design?
Well, in the most exquisite homes, everything is custom. So it's custom everything. And essentially the best of the best, a Tom Kundig house, for example, is essentially handmade. So they're handmade houses. But the materials, actually, the interiors too, I've sold Tom Kundig's first commission, which I think really put me on the map for, more architecturally significant homes. But I had to have, I'd already proven myself to this client that I had what it took to represent her. And so selling Tom Kundig's first commission, which was a collaborative effort between owner and architect, the house itself was built, out of steel and concrete and glass and custom doors and custom, windows and a gigantic pivot door at the entry and a different type of roof. But the interior was very simple, and concrete floors, and there were plywood floors upstairs. And in the home I just sold on Queen Anne, that house was designed after, was thought to be a junior to the original, which was called Studio House. So this home was based on the design of the original, Tom Kundig's first commission. And they too had plywood floors upstairs. They had some very, very simple, but that takes us back to kind of design 101. When you're working with minimal, less expensive materials, in some regard, think about all of the architects, or how they designed their first office. They were beautiful, but they were designed with minimal and inexpensive materials. So there's a contrast to some of these homes because they're architecturally significant. They're not necessarily defined as luxury in terms of what people today consider luxury, which is every wall is a special stone or, you know, an abundance of marble. These architecturally significant contemporary homes are, it really is the materials. It's the steel, it's the Corten steel, it's, you know, the concrete, it's the way, it's the floor plan. You know, the floor plan has so much to do with it.
There's such a dichotomy. So before we talk about floor plans, because that's a good one too, plywood floors.
There are plywood floors. There were plywood
Yeah.
floors in Studio House and minimal, trying to remember what the cabinets were. The cabinets weren't fancy, but the house, the design, the exterior, all of the, you know, the gizmos. Tom Kundig likes to use a wheel oftentimes to open a window or to open some shades. And so you'll see certain design elements that are unique to Tom Kundig carry forward into other projects because owners see them, you know, as they're looking through his past designs, and they're trying to figure out, well, which design elements do I want?
Yeah.
But coincidentally, the home that I just sold back in November that he designed was, sorry, there's a window.
Oh, we've got a guest on the, we've got a special guest on the Jerry Metcalf podcast.
We do, sorry. And we can,
no, you're good.
We can cut for a second. There's a window.
Okay, so the cleaners are gone. We're back recording now. I'm going to just touch on these plywood floors for a minute because I think it's fun. And I want everybody, like, we're talking about Seattle here, where I've seen lots there that sell for 30 million, and I bet that's not the most expensive. But like plywood, I think this speaks to like what is luxury. You've got homes with plywood. The plywood is like, and this goes into what is art. Like, is
exactly. It really is. It truly is. It's thinking outside.
Yeah. And I'm going to go with the word thinking outside the box and in everything, whether it's problems, opportunities, art, it's emotion. And I'm going to take a shot, and I'd just love to get your take. Plywood, I'm going like, some of it's to make a point of how good I am. That's the cynical view. Another one might be nostalgia.
Nostalgia, and I don't really know why plywood, why they use plywood, other than it could be there wasn't a need for. I think plywood does evoke a certain sensibility, and in thinking back on that home, you know, this was the second floor where the bedrooms were, and you had poured concrete floors on the main level, poured concrete in the lower level. And I think plywood just made sense.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to think if what a finished floor would have felt like.
It wouldn't have been right.
It wouldn't have been right because it's so industrial. I think the word is industrial. And so think industrial, which is what the contemporary architecture is really based on. And I think we've come a long way from the core. And so think about what luxury contemporary homes that are of the luxury style, they have a lot of added elements that aren't necessarily going to be found in these true architecturally significant homes, unless the owner, you know, unless it's as a result of the owner's own personal, you know, sensibilities. But I think Studio House was Tom Kundig's purest piece, and it was the first, and it set his career off. It was featured in the New York Times as soon as it was finished, and
Wow.
it really set his career on fire. It was the beginning.
Something that comes to mind is in Michael Dreyfus said this on an interview that was, I think it was 195 or 6, close to the first one you did, but he said it's about, with real estate, art, whatever it is, seeing the things other people don't see.
Mhm. And that's very, very true. Very true. And I think it is what separates you. And I think there's a huge difference between people who have this level of passion for architecture and design, and people who don't. And it's really obvious. And I think, that's how someone with my background stands out against agents who sell expensive homes but don't really consider what went into it and really what they're made of. They're just, they're talking in broader terms usually.
Some of it too, like I love like what part of what I love about the podcast is seeing what other people don't see is in you. You're the person that you're present in what you do, and in that presence is where art comes, and that presence is the presence to see in a property what everybody's rushing past to get to the sale, get to the goal, and going back and being present in the essence of what true art is, of what truly good architecture is.
Yeah. And I've heard since with the sale that just happened back in November, agents who actually live in the neighborhood said, wow, wow. I mean, the price. And I said, yeah, the price. I mean, you had all of the elements. You had the best of the best, from the site to the architect to the view. You can't recreate that. That's the thing. It really truly is one of one. And you can't count on finding that site and then waiting 3 or 4 years to get in with this architect in particular. Tom Kundig is booked essentially 3 years out at least. So there's something to that as well.
Well, you can't recreate that. So this is like this is so important to me personally, and I know it is to you just because of your track record in business, is how many times do we hear it's all price? And then you sell a property and everybody says, but the price. How about but the property?
Right.
How about what makes it one of a kind? Right? Whatever price point it's in. I didn't get to sell any Tom Kundig's, it was in Atlanta, but it was all about like, what are people paying for? It's not just square footage. It's way
No.
beyond that. And being able to have the eye, there's stuff people do and don't pay for. There's stuff that does and doesn't have value. But as a real estate agent, truly having the understanding of what that is and how to represent the seller so that it's showcased, and how to represent the buyer so that it's identified.
Correct. Understanding what you're looking at and what it takes and what it would take to recreate that. I think in working with clients in the upper, in the upper price ranges and, 10 million and up, although this one was 7.5, it was 7.5 million because it was half the size of the original studio house. So studio house was 7,000 square feet. This one is 4,500 square feet. It's a junior version of studio house and absolutely based off of the original, the design. In terms of creating value, help buyers understand what they're looking at. And then the flip side of that is if you're representing sellers, really understanding what you're looking at, what went into it, and telling that story, and being able to share with buyers why the price, where's the
Yeah.
value, did we get here, and you can't, you can't build it for this. So in a softer market, it's harder to to it's harder to achieve bigger numbers,
Yeah.
because everyone is so price sensitive. So in a softer market, it's a very, very good time to buy something really extraordinary, because you are going to get a value. And
It's
then
like, it's really like art.
it is 1000%.
Looking at your career, there's this really, it's like being, I think every career, I think business is an art. So there's this element of being an artist. And then there's this element of the people that you're working with and the relationships and the conversations that you're having. There are sides of it. We're talking about discretion. We're talking about difficult conversations. We're talking about fun conversations. What is that world, and what are those relationships like, and how do you navigate them?
Well, they're exciting. I mean, it's very exciting to meet new people and get the call, and have always seen or watched a particular house, or seen something being built, and never in a million years thinking, oh, I might get a call on that someday. And and then also meeting people who are like-minded, you know and you strike up a conversation, and the next thing you know, you're selling them multiple homes over many years, and or they turn out to be collectors, collectors of architecture. And we do have that here in Seattle. We have people who have a fondness for a particular architect, and will say, hey, I saw that, this is on the market, or maybe they've heard that it's coming on the market, or maybe I've heard. Then I'll, say to them, well, this might be coming up. Well, it doesn't mean that they're going to sell their current home. They are collecting, they're collecting these homes. And that, to me, is really exciting. But it's nice to be able to be in the same room with these people and hear their stories as well.
Yeah, representing, like, forget, this isn't about home buyers and sellers. This is home collectors.
Mhm.
Um, so when you're representing people like that, it's like it's right people, right support, right connections, but that's not enough. Knowing your market, having the focus, being diligent. I would bet, just like everybody else in business, difficult times arise, difficult conversations, challenging conversations, and then there are always probably really, there are things that are really important about discretion, about respect, and about giving people what they need to make the right decisions, despite the fact that so much is weighing on you, on whether something closes and on your reputation and how it unfolds. How do you like, what is kind of like what are your, is it a mindset? Is it a paradigm? What are your staples to continue to grow the trust and have the right kinds of conversations with your clients and just in the industry?
Well, it's delicate for sure. And I do think your mindset has a lot to do with it. In fact, last night I was touring a listing across the street from where I live, in a building that I interviewed for a listing. And we talked about price a little bit during the first conversation. And oftentimes, if there isn't a direct comparable to a property, let's say with condominiums, you can oftentimes look a couple of floors above or a couple of floors below, or something is sold within the last 6 months or the last year, that you can extrapolate the data from. So it's always, there's the data, there's how it feels, there's the fit and finish, there's the view, let's say. And so there's some similarities, but for the most part, they're all a little different. But having difficult conversations with sellers who maybe aren't as in tune with what's happening in the market as you or I would be, it can be really challenging. And I guess in this recent listing that I was hired for, I came in after another agent who had a listing in the building, who I think was more aggressive in her approach to price. And by aggressive, I mean, she asked them what they were thinking. They gave her a number and she just sort of rolled her eyes and said, well, that's just not achievable, and didn't have a more delicate conversation with them. And I think it's being honest, but it's also in the delivery, how we deliver the message.
I mean, there's so many layers in that situation of the conversations to be had, the representation of the property, how we represent our clients, short-term, long-term, and most of all, like here we've got the record-breaking agent talking to us now. You break records on knowing and understanding and bringing out value, not making it up. That just hurts people. It's not a deception game.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to go into our final 3 questions. Number 1, and you may or may not remember these from the first interview, which is always better when you don't, because the answers are always so good. But number 1, if you looking at your whole career, if you had to identify the one most powerful resource in creating your success, what would you say that it has been?
I think patience.
You seem so naturally patient too. That's why it's such a resource. What does it take?
To have patience? I think also a lot of faith too, because we don't have a steady paycheck. We rely on, we are independent contractors.
Yeah.
So I think it takes having a lot of faith and knowing that you're just putting it out there and people will find you, people will talk about you, and you always want people to say nice things. And I think having, when I hear someone say, oh, so-and-so said something really nice about you, and I can't wait until I need to sell or buy, there's no better compliment than hearing that someone said something nice about you. So I think it's your reputation. Your reputation precedes you in this business.
And I would say, looking at your career, you've built it on the right support, the right people, and real knowledge, a lot of integrity that has created the character that has given you the reputation.
Oh, thank you.
Question number 2. Question number 2, game show. So thinking about like books, is there a book, it doesn't have to be business, but just a book, business or not, that has been most impactful on your life that we have to read?
No, well, I have 4 books in front of me right now that I am looking forward to digging into, and 3 of them are on wellness. So The Age of Scientific Wellness, Outlive, and Sanjay Gupta's book, Keep Sharp.
Oh, I like that. What was the second one? Keep Sharp. What was before Keep Sharp?
The first one was The Age of Scientific Wellness, and the second one is Outlive by Peter Attia, A-T-T.
Love these names.
I-A. And then the Future We Choose, which is the stubborn optimist's guide to the climate crisis.
The Future We Choose. I like the name.
Yeah. So those are 4 books that are sitting on my table, ready to go.
Love it. All right, so is there one you've read, or are you gonna leave? Are we gonna lead with you? Or one you've read in the past in your life that we should read?
No, I think I just sort of turned the page. I have a book actually in front of me called, oddly, Why Design Matters, by Debbie Millman, that I'm excited to dig into as well.
That one sounds really good.
That does look good.
I love it. They're for like, hey, read these let's start a book club. I love that. Why design matters. That's been a big topic today. Last question. As we have our conversation, we're here together. It's been way too long. It's so good to see you. But for you, for me, and for everybody listening, if there's one thing you hope we remember from our conversation today, what would it be?
I think just the hope is that more brokers dig in a little bit deeper into how things are made, and what the differences are, and what differentiates a newly built home from an exquisitely built home, and an exquisitely designed home versus some plans from a builder. I think the more most of the sophisticated agents in our area have a good sense of design, I would say, but I think it's the next tier of agents who haven't had the privilege of representing these properties at this level. I think that's something that agents should really think about. And as you said, it's more than bedrooms and baths and square footage. I think if the takeaway is really dig in, really, find your passion in this business, and design does really matter. Quality matters, and get to know who these architects and designers are, and get to know who the contractors are who are building these exquisite and extraordinary homes.
Yeah, get to know the essence and the root of what the profession and what it's about, what we're really paid for.
Yeah.
Love it. Moira, it is so fabulous to connect and see you and have you for this full hour today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It has just been such a treat to be here with you, and it's been way, way, way too long.